Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and a very warm welcome to Friday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. Oh boy, is there some interesting shit going on in the DC Universe. No, it's nothing to do with their movies or their gaming or their animation or their television. Their interesting shit is going on behind the scenes. So we've got a few things to discuss on today's show. First of all, I want to discuss the fact that Zack Snyder has announced tickets being on sale for SnyderCon 2, a 3-day event, I think from the 27th or the 28th of April. He will be screening all 3 of his DC movies, Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, and Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut. I'm very, very envious of anyone going to this event. Wow. And he will have a question and answer session as well. And all of this goes to the suicide prevention charity. So Zack has actually thanked Warner Brothers for helping him make this possible. How have they made this possible? Why is he thanking them after saying they were anti-Snyder after the release of the Snyder Cut? How things are turning. And I'll talk about this. Well, basically, DC is their trademark. He wouldn't be able to be getting Jim Lee to be drawing these pictures without their say-so. Jim Lee is an employee of DC, which means he's an employee of Warner Brothers Discovery because they own the DC trademark. They're allowing him to show these movies, and it all goes to charity. Warner Brothers won't be making any money, any green, out of this event. So Zack Snyder and Warner Brothers are working together for this event. He's calling it Full Circle. It's very, very interesting. Should we be worried that he's thanking Warner Brothers? Well, look, from the outside looking in, they've made this possible. He would have to thank them. Probably that's the least they would expect from him. I don't think we should read too much into it, but let's be clear, because I know some fans are worried about this, so let me disperse the myth. If Warner Brothers have convinced Zack to stand on the stage and say, I'm done, it's time for you, my fans, to move on, this doesn't help Warner Brothers. It doesn't help DC Universe or DC Studios, because the Snyder fans will never support DCU. No matter if Zack goes, let's keep going, doesn't say anything or says, it's time to let it go. They're never going to support those movies, and they're going to continue to boycott them because that studio stopped Zack from finishing, his arc. And they're never going to let that go. They're never going to forget that. And if Zack was to stand at SnyderCon 2 and say it's time to move on, this will be a very dangerous game to play, considering he needs his fans' support, with Rebel Moon and Army of the Dead. If that goes forward, he reckons he doesn't really know if that's going to go forward at the moment. And that's interesting. I think if Rebel Moon is successful, then the Army of the Dead franchise thing is dead. I don't think it's done the business anyway. I think it did okay and his fans tried to support it. But in terms of a general Netflix audience coming in, I don't think it was all that. It was okay. It was well made. It was, Zack did a good job with it. But anyway, so I think it will be a dangerous game for Zack to play, but maybe he's made an agreement with Warner Brothers. It's interesting. Why have they decided to support this so much? They've obviously come to some arrangement. He rang up James Gunn to congratulate him about his Gods and Monsters slate. Now, let's be clear. I do have issues with what's happening at WB, especially since the reaction from WB and people like Zachary Levi, for the terrible box office of Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and the way they've treated the fans and The Rock is disgusting. And I do have concerns, which I will discuss a little bit later on. But, Warner Brothers, have they done this out the kindness of their heart? Has Zack agreed to tell the fans to move on? He's calling it Full Circle. Full Circle could mean anything. We don't know. What I do know is the end of April can't come soon enough. I can't wait to see what he has to say to the fans. And it's very, very interesting because he has to be very careful here. Now, so there's two scenarios for me. There's three scenarios. That him thanking Warner Brothers actually doesn't mean much, and he would have to do it anyway because they are supporting this event officially. So that's one thing. Secondly, that he's done a deal with the devil so he can tell the fans to move on. As I say, this won't help DC at all. This won't change the stance of the Snyderverse stands. They'll respect Zack, that he wants them to move on. That'll be different. But ultimately, it doesn't help DC. So if they think by getting Zack to publicly do all of this, it's not going to help them. They've got a lot of problems. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And so there is another scenario here that somehow he's done a deal to actually finish his, Justice League arc, which is very, very unlikely. But if you look at the poster of the Cavill Superman statue from BVS, it's got another trademark on it, Universal. So I don't know if Universal are sponsoring it or what they've got to do with it, because ultimately DC has nothing to do with Universal. I don't know if he's also going to screen Watchmen. Was it Paramount and Warner Brothers who did that movie together? I think it had nothing to do with Universal. Maybe Universal had something to do with it. So maybe he's going to screen Watchmen as well. But I don't think that he is. So seeing the Universal logo is very, very interesting, considering as well the rumours that they will buy Warner Brothers as soon as they legally are able to in 2024. Another, interesting situation. We've gone from Time Warner to AT&T to Discovery, and nothing has changed. It's just got worse and worse and worse for DC. So that's my opinion about that I can't wait to see what Zack actually says at SnyderCon 2. Will he tell the fans it's time to move on? Will he tell the fans that he's going to continue with his Snyderverse movies? What's going to happen here? I think something is certainly going to happen at this event beyond him screening the movies. Will the audience be allowed to ask him about the Netflix campaign? Will he make sure that they're not allowed? Will he answer questions about the Netflix campaign? Look what happened on the Snyder Queens live. When any question about selling Snyderverse to Netflix was actually deleted. Was that from Zack because he didn't want to answer those questions? I don't know. It's very, very interesting. But him thanking Warner Brothers so publicly is certainly interesting. Him ringing up James Gunn to congratulate him on the Gods on Monsters slate is very, very curious, because I didn't even think they had much of a relationship. That's an interesting situation. And what's going to be even more interesting, if Zack does tell the fans to move on, what will be their reaction as well? So that's SnyderCon 2 at the end of April, and I'll be covering it. Whatever happens, I'll be here to give you my reaction and my opinions. Now, moving on. Zachary Levi just won't stop. He's just not stopping, opening and shutting his mouth. He did a live on Instagram where he continued to defend himself, Shazam 1 and Shazam Fury of the Gods, Peter Safran and Walter Hamada. He tried to justify his decision in reposting the article from Humberto Gonzalez and the rap about The Rock putting a block on the JSA Hawkman post-credit scene. He said he wasn't looking to make excuses for the film's failure. He said he wasn't trying to blame anyone. You clearly are trying to throw The Rock under the bus, you liar. And he's trying to defend Peter Safran and Walter Hamada. He wants to get the facts straight. So the only thing I can see through all of this is that I was right yesterday that Peter Safran's job is at risk as co-head of DC Studios. Let's look at this situation very carefully. Walter Hamada, right? Walter Hamada, the Hamadaverse has had five movies that have now failed at the domestic and global box office. Now, what's even more interesting is Peter Safran was heavily attached to the Hamadaverse. Hamada brought him in as a producer, as a partner. And Zaslav's going to be looking at this, right, and saying, hang on a minute, you were part of an era that flopped. But what's even more dumb about this is Zaslav, who's allowed Safran to partner up with Gunn for the new DC studios and the new DC universe. But maybe Zaslav didn't have a choice. I don't know. But what's interesting is here that the Safran was Walter Hamada's partner as the DC Films president. And now, right, he's James Gunn's partner at DC Universe. It's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting. So that's one of my points I keep on trying to make. If Safran's part of a DC franchise that's had 5 flops, 5 terribly received movies at the box office, but not only that, not the best of movies themselves. He is a part of that. He's a part of that result. So they went, yeah, that's okay. You can partner up James Gunn. So what's going to be the difference? If he's part of one defunct, failed universe, what difference does it make if it's just James? I mean, how much freedom has James Gunn got here? And we know that Safran was pressuring him to agree to direct Superman Legacy, something that James didn't want to do either. So it's all very, very interesting. The contributing factor to the Hamadaverse and DC Universe and DC Studios is Peter Safran. So all of a sudden, I wouldn't be surprised if Zaslav's thinking, oh shit, why did I allow him to convince me to make him and Gunn the head of DC Studios and run this new DC universe? Look at this Shazam movie. It's a fucking nightmare. We're not going to make any money. He was Walter Hamada's partner. I mean, that's an interesting thing as well. He fired Walter Hamada as president of DC Studios, but he didn't fire Peter Safran. Why? There's something very hokey about this whole situation. It's like Zaslav has had Safran forced on him, and he can't get rid of him. He's from the outside looking in. He got rid of Emmerich. He hasn't really. He's got a production deal. He's still there in the background. He's fired Hamada. Has he now? Or is he just in the background? Who knows? So this is, these are all very dubious, suspicious situations as well. So that's Zachary Levi on a live defending the Hamadaverse, defending Peter Safran. I don't think Zachary is defending his own career, worried about his own career. He's worried about his friend, Peter Safran, because don't forget, if Safran does get fired as co-CEO of DC Studios, then Zachary Levi has no chance of returning as Shazam. Clearly with Safran there's still a small chance he can cameo somewhere. But it was a very, very desperate video, full of excuses. I'll tell you why I don't like the throwing of The Rock under the bus. Because he no longer works at, WB or DC. He's not going to have a public spat with Zachary Levi or Warner Brothers. That's not The Rock's style. I know there was kind of a situation with him and, and another actor, and I forgot his name now. It's the guy, it's the guy who does Groot in Guardians. What's his bloody name? Anyway, that guy. But more often than not, The Rock doesn't really, muddy his reputation publicly. So The Rock's going to keep his mouth shut. He's a gent. He took his defeat with Black Adam on the chin. He got to fulfill his childhood dream of making a Black Adam movie. I think Black Adam is better than Shazam! Fury of the Gods, if you ask me. It's a more memorable movie, and it's more epic than Shazam! Fury of the Gods as well. And it's going to end up being the more profitable movie as well. So what they're doing by throwing this guy under the bus is absolutely embarrassing and hideous. And he's on a live trying to justify this situation and trying to defend his friend Peter Safran and Walter Hamada. But I should think that David Zaslav doesn't give a shit about what Zachary Levi is saying. So he's basically confirming again Now, that basically the JSA was supposed to be in that post-credit scene. It was supposed to be Hawkman. And obviously the girl who can do the strong wind. I always forget her name, right? So it was supposed to be the new JSA set up in Black Adam. And The Rock put a block on that post-credit scene. So the whole point is, just like in the post-credit scene we saw, they're trying to recruit him to the JSA. But my point is here, why are they recruiting him to the JSA? Why isn't he being recruited for the Justice League? This seems very, very strange. Was the JSA going to replace the Justice League? Was there going to be a JSA as well as a Justice League? Were they going to be kept separately? It's clear to me that the JSA were going to be part of the Rock's, Black Adam's side of things. We were going to have two different sides of the DC universe. What an absolute mess, because The Rock wanted to keep his shit separate. But he wanted to keep his shit separate even from the Shazam character. That's why he blocked the post-credit scene. So yeah, The Rock has wrongdoing here, but literally throwing the guy under the bus publicly isn't the dumb thing. It's not what you should be doing. And he's saying he's not trying to blame anyone, Zachary Levi. You are. You are trying to blame The Rock. You're trying to defend Peter Safran so he doesn't lose his job. So what I gauge from all of this situation is that Peter Safran's role as co-CEO of DC Studios is under threat. Someone's going to pay the price for the Shazam Fury of the Gods failure. Because Zaslav, we know, is reactive. And he will continue to be reactive. He can be reactive in a positive and negative way. I mean, it's interesting, really, considering James Gunn's The Suicide Squad flopped, that he made James Gunn the CEO or the co-CEO of DC Studios. It's not normally the way Zaslav thinks, but he's done it. He wanted Todd Phillips to run DC Studios originally because the Joker made over $1 billion. But that, you know, Zaslav's thinking is very, very financial, but he doesn't really understand film, which he's admitted, and he has taken advice. I'm not sure he's taken the correct advice. He's supposed to be taking advice from Alan Horn, a genius, a pioneer. He used to be CEO of, WB. He's the one who helped Iger build up Disney to what it is today. You know, buying Lucasfilm hasn't worked out, Marvel Studios, Pixar, all of that was down to Alan Horn and Bob Iger. So we got very excited with that partnership. But it's not really working out. It doesn't compute why Peter Safran, someone who was part of the Hamadaverse that failed, and now is part of DC Studios and DC Universe. It doesn't really make sense to me. But anyway, now the third part of today's show, I want to look at the box offices for every DCEU movie and try and kind of figure out in analysis where it all went wrong. What broke the DC brand, who broke the DC brand, and I think I've got a pretty good idea of what went wrong here. So Man of Steel begins at 650 million, a global end box office of 650 million. Clearly that's disappointing for a Superman movie, but it's a good amount of money to start off your franchise with. It's a solid start, not the start they would have wanted, but it's solid. So obviously they panicked, they didn't make a Superman sequel, they blamed Superman like they did after Justice League. It's always Superman's fault, right? Anyway, so they decided to do Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, which makes a whopping 850 million. Its opening day was historic. Its opening was historic. It was a huge opening, but its drop-off was also historic as well. But at the end of the day, it made a whopping 850 million. That's a good ton of money. Then the Suicide Squad movie, the third movie in the DCEU, made just under 800 million. The film didn't even cost 100 million to make. So they're happy with the money, but the response to the film and reviews was terrible. But they interfered with David Ayer's movie. It's their fault. They did it to themselves. Maybe David Ayer's movie would have got better reviews and made around the same money, maybe even a little bit more. Who knows? We'll never know. Then we got Wonder Woman, which made around 800 million. That's good money. So far we've got 650, 850, 850, we've got just under 800, and now we've got an 800 million global box office for Wonder Woman. Really, really good. These are good, solid box offices for the start of the DC franchise. This is not a disaster. Now, it could have gone better. They could have made more with Man of Steel. But ultimately, the box office up to now is, it starts at 650, it goes up, then it's not, basically Suicide Squad isn't as much as BVS, which is understandable. Wonder Woman's around 800. So basically, the box office is really good and solid up to now. Then we go to Justice League. Now, obviously, we know the story of Justice League. We know what they did to Zack Snyder. This is the moment Zack was out on his ear, and they decided to go down another direction. So Justice League was a disaster. I think that film made about 650 at the global box office. Now, if that was a solo movie, you could say that's a solid. But a Justice League movie should be bringing in around $2 billion at the global box office. It didn't. But was the DC brand damaged at this point? No. Because after Justice League, people came into the next movie just under a year later, which was Aquaman. That made over $1 billion at the global box office. So up till now, it's been pretty good, solid, and Aquaman makes amazing box office, and coming after a disaster like Justice League. That's proof that the DC brand wasn't broken then. Because if people's trust had been broken after Justice League, no one is coming in to see Aquaman. $1 billion movies, and Aquaman, $1 billion movie, and Aquaman is the first movie Walter Hamada has his name on. But this is when the DC brand was broken. It's after Aquaman, and basically as we get to the release of Shazam. We go from $1 billion movie to Aquaman to a movie that makes just over 300 million at the global box office, which is Shazam. That's a huge come down. You could call Shazam maybe not the kind of big hitter like other characters. Of course, Captain Marvel used to be a huge character. I mean, before I was born, before you were born, most probably, in the comics. But we went from $1 billion movie to just over a $300 million movie. And I think they even had China, Shazam. So it wasn't a great result, but again, the movie cost under $100 million to make. They made good money. So Walter Hamada at this point looks like he's winning because Shazam got good reviews, but it was a big come down. So really from that moment, the box office starts to really, really suffer. We go from Shazam to Birds of Prey, which is a flop, a failure. It doesn't work. It's a solid movie, but it has toxic commentary against men. It's an extremist movie, but it's a flop. It's failed. So we've gone from just over 300 million to just over 200 million. So you can say, for some reason, from Shazam to Birds of Prey, the DC brand was broken. And I'll discuss why when we get done with this. So we go from Birds of Prey to Wonder Woman 84. Now the film, look, let's not talk about the quality of the film. Everyone's got their own opinions on this one. You know mine. But for me, it's not a good film. And the only good thing about the film really is Pedro Pascal's performance. That really does shine Patty Jenkins and Jeff Johns shit. As far as I'm concerned, Pedro is a sensational actor. We know that. He's even making The Last of Us look like a good show. Anyway, let's focus in the subject of hand. So basically, Wonder Woman 84 is released December of 2020 after being delayed on multiple occasions for many, many reasons. And I think there's some suspicious reasons why the original theatrical version of it was changed, because they decided to delay it from 2019 to 2020, which fucked up their profit margins, because if they released it in 2019, this was pre-COVID pandemic. So again, this studio really scored more own goals than a footballer. So Wonder Woman 84 didn't make a lot of money theatrically because of the pandemic. We have to be honest about that. It went day and date, and it was a very controversial decision. Apparently it did really well on HBO Max, but we'll never really know. You can't prove or disprove those numbers. It didn't make money in the cinema. I don't think it would have made money in the cinema, whether there was a COVID pandemic or not. But that, this film gets a pass because we'll never know what kind of numbers it would have made. But it didn't make any money. So, again, in the Hamadaverse, he's basically allowed Patty Jenkins to do whatever she wanted with this film, and it was a mistake. So, we go from Wonder Woman 84 and Patty Jenkins to James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. All of a sudden, James Gunn's part of the DC universe, or the DC extended universe as we knew it then. So that was a very interesting situation. So this is a very good movie, a movie I really, really enjoyed watching, but it only made, again, just like Birds of Prey, just over 200 million. And so that was a big shock. It was day and date. It was during the COVID pandemic. It was during a variant as well. So it was affected by that. But how much more it would have made, I don't know. But again, we can only deal with the facts that we know. It's another flop in the Hamada and Peter Safran era. A man has been rewarded as co-CEO of DC Studios right now. Again, very, very suspicious, very interesting situation. James Gunn's The Suicide Squad flops. So then we go to Black Adam. This doesn't have a China release. It makes about 400 million at the global box office. Now, that's what's very interesting about this. That's double Birds of Prey. That's double James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. And it's going to be double what Levi's and David F. Sandberg's Shazam! Fury of the Gods will end up making. So Black Adam, even though it was a failure because of what they spent on the movie, it was a very expensive movie to make. 400 million wasn't enough. There's no question about that. I'm not trying to suggest it was enough, but it was double more than Gunn's movie and Birds of Prey. So then you get Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which basically opens to a 33 million domestic box office. An absolute fucking disaster. So the Hamadaverse has been a disaster. But when did the DC brand break? When did the general audience decide to desert it? Now, there's this saying where people say, there's DC fans on the internet and there's DC fans in the theatre, blaming DC fans for these flops. DC fans, most of them, or at least half of them, support these movies. We know the Snyderverse stands will never support these films. I don't think it's DC fans' fault that these movies are failing. It's because the general audience isn't supporting the DC brand anymore. Where was it broken? I think it was broken just after Shazam and just before Birds of Prey. I think it was all the information that was coming out as well about what they did to Snyder. The Snyderverse stands were really pushing a lot of narratives online. I think the general audience saw all of this and said, well, this is a bit of a shit show. The reputation for Warner Brothers was in the dirt, and I think people started to think, you know what, we're not going to support these movies. They're shit. They've got no direction. This was Snyder's universe. He's gone. It's aimless. It's a rudderless ship. We're not going to support it. And I think that's where the DC brand was broken. Because you can see it. We go from $1 billion movie in Aquaman to a just over $300 million movie in the first Shazam movie. So basically that's where the DC brand was broken. And in fact, the Snyder movies financially were in a very solid situation. After that, you get $1 billion movie, then it goes downhill from that. So that says a lot about this universe. So in fact, destabilizing the Snyderverse, moving away from Snyder, hurt them more than it was ever going to help them. It hindered them. But if they stayed with Zack until he finished his arc, then maybe bringing on Joss Whedon and Jeff Johns to do a new era, that would have really worked. And I think they'd be in a better position right now. But don't expect New Hollywood to have any logic or common sense. This has been Friday's edition of the DC Universe Daily with me, Mick, your host, with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you again in the next video. Till I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.